Well, good morning, and thank you for coming out to visit with us on such short notice today. We did become aware of some information last night and thought it would be appropriate that we convene so that we can make sure that the school district does present the same information to all of our media sources. And again, this is information that we've also shared with our friends at the City of Shreveport. One thing I'd like to start off by stressing and appreciating is that communication is always the key, and we certainly have enjoyed a very healthy communication with our city as well as our city council over the past few years. And as we move forward, we look forward to continuing that communication to make sure that we are the very best city that we possibly can be. However, last night we did become aware that the City Council made an ordinance to move some monies out of the monies that had been budgeted for school crossing guards and move that to a different account. Now, in that ordinance, it did specify that Caddo Parish schools would begin a conversation with Caddo Parish schools to assume some of those responsibilities. I do want to certainly go on record today to note that Caddo Parish Schools, either my office nor the office of the president of the board, has been notified about any meetings. I think there has been some communications that there were some meetings that we did not attend, and that just is not true. We certainly do always welcome the opportunity to entertain anything that provides the very best opportunities for our children. But as we've learned about this information, of course, some of it secondhand, some of it even third-hand, as we understand it, we do have some concerns. Concerns in the respect that as a school system, we see our responsibility as public education. So when we are looking at our budgetary dollars and we're determining how do we best spend those, we're looking at what's going to provide the very best opportunities for teachers and children in the classroom. And I think if you look across our state, you'll see that dollars are stretched in all departments. So I do respect even some of the concerns that the city is having as to how they allocate their resources. One thing, though, that I'd like to add to that, though, is that when it comes to the safety of our students, we have had a very healthy relationship with the City of Shreveport. In fact, we budget right at $2 million a year for our security officers, which are Shreveport police in some cases, that actually come on our campuses and help us with security. So we certainly take responsibility for safety and security when it comes to what's happening on our property, and that being extended to our bus stops in the city. Our concern, though, is that when we look at what our crossing guards do, that's not a function of public education, but we see that as a public safety issue. If you look at the lines that have been drawn in the streets, that was not something that Caddo Parish schools did, but that's a function of the city. When you think about who the crossing guards are employed by, those are not employees of the school system, but they are employees of the city. And we see that responsibility being that of the city. And we see that as a service that's provided to the citizens of our parish. When you look at our abilities to control streets, we have no jurisdiction to do that. When you look at where many of our crossing sites are located, many of them are, down the blocks from some of our schools. We have no means of controlling that. When you look at who all actually has crossing guards, I mean, there are private schools, there are charter schools, there are several different entities that are outside of Caddo Parish schools that are benefiting from crossing guards. But what we say today, though, is when we look at this, we see this as a public safety issue. We see this as a service to the citizens. We see this as an opportunity for us to continue to work with the city to determine how do we make sure children get to school safely. The thing that's probably the saddest about this, as we review the list of students and look at the schools and look at opportunities, generally speaking, these are not our students that take advantage of our buses. These are not our students whose parents are bringing them to school in SUVs. These are our students who are doing the very best job they can to get to school. They're walking there, and we certainly will do anything we can to support them getting to school safely and to support them when they're on the campus, but we do not see it as our responsibility to provide for coverage and safety when we're dealing with public streets. This time I will take any questions that you have concerning this topic. Yes, sir.
So they're saying you're going to get $75,000 less. So where do you go from here? What recourse do you get?
Thank you very much. Now, we don't receive any money from the city of Shreveport. We actually provide them with $12,000 to help support them. I think it's very important to note that the crossing guards are not employees of the school system. This is a service just like if you call the police to your house for a domestic issue. This is a part of the Shreveport Police Department service. So the question of what do they do in that with the absence of that $75,000 is really a question for them. And that's the conversation that we look forward to having with them. We do look forward to having that conversation because we do think it's very important that we communicate early to parents that the City Council and our City of Shreveport has made a decision to reduce crossing guard services, and we need to make sure that families are aware of that. Again, when you look at what we are responsible for, we're absolutely responsible for providing a safe environment when students enter the campus. We cannot be responsible for what happens before you get on the campus. If you think about this in the respect that this service is not to the school system, but this service is provided to the citizens. And those are the persons that we want to make sure that we support the city in communicating with as soon as we can.
I have a question. Good morning.
Good morning.
Were you guys invited to meet? The press release you all sent out last night said you weren't, but I talked to city council members in the past and they said you guys were invited to a meeting for the public safety committee.
Right. You know, I think very interestingly enough, I was in Washington, D.C. with the Amazing Shake students when that trip happened. Our trips are so well planned, I can tell you when I'll be in Washington, D.C. next year with the Amazing Shake students. I encourage you, anyone that tells you they invited us to a meeting, to ask them to show you a copy of the invitation, the email, the text message. We were not invited to any meeting.
So in terms of recourse, if you both say you're not going to do this service, what are you telling parents on the first day of school? Who's going to be helping with the crossing guards?
What I would say to you is that's a conversation that logistically we'll have to sit down and figure out how that actually will happen. The only thing we can do as a school system, though, is ensure parents that we will continue to provide the level of safety that we have always provided. We will continue to make sure when students enter the campus that we're providing them with safety. But I do think that it will be a logistical conversation with the city around which sites will continue to have service, which sites will not. You know, the last thing I heard about this, I think it's very important to note, was that at a May 14th City Council meeting, the recommendation was made that there would be a feasibility study. So we would look at where all the guards are and determine, is there any space to make reductions or is there space to make modifications? That was the last I heard. I don't know if that's actually happened or not. However, the next message I got was last night that this ordinance had passed and that we were involved in that. And my role today, too, is to clarify that we have had no voice in this. So we are somewhat behind the 8 ball as well in determining what this looks like on August 12th when we welcome the students back.
Was this kind of a shock or surprise to you?
It's an absolute understatement how surprised I was that this was passed.
Why didn't you guys go to a council meeting?
Why they don't come to school board meetings? Because we're not. I mean, we'd have no reason to be at a city council meeting, and they don't attend our school board meetings either.
If you guys had to actually fund crossing guards for next year, if it was pushed, how bad would that hurt the school system?
Right. It is not in our budget process. We have not funded that. I think it, too, is interesting that this is a change in the city's budget midstream. This had been funded. This is a midstream change. As we do our budget for next year, the only thing that we have budgeted as it relates to security guards is a $12,000 payment that was arranged with the school board in 2012. And this was a part of helping to support a pay raise for the crossing guards, and that's something that's budgeted. So that $12,000 is budgeted for that, but at this time we're in the middle of the budget process and there is no room for us to add this cost to our budget.
So in terms of the next step, the very next step, are you going to get on the phone or email or what have you? What are you gonna actually reach out to the council?
You know, what I will tell you is that I am in conversations with the mayor, and I will talk to the mayor. No, you know, this is such a fresh situation that no next steps have really even been determined as to what our next step is. But I do want to make sure that we clarify some things that have not been reported fairly in the media around us being invited to medias, around our voice in this conversation, because there has been no voice.
And did you guys ever have a written contract or just an agreement?
Just an agreement.
Years.
Well, and what I will say, though, and remember that there's no need for a written contract, because this is not a service to the school system. This is a service to those people whose babies are walking to school, those taxpayers whose babies are walking to school. This is a service to them. We pick up our responsibility when they get on the campus.
Have you had any response from parents reaching out to you, or have they said anything to you?
You know, I haven't. I do think that this is a very new conversation because, again, I think most people, as I've listened this morning and last night, expected that the next step would be this feasibility study. So I think that when the council votes last night to make this change, I don't think people have really had an opportunity to react. But I do encourage families to make sure that if there are concerns, they need to make sure that they're communicating those to their city council persons, too, who actually made the vote.
Big question is, and I'm sure you probably already looked at this, how do other districts handle something like this? Right across the river, you got Bossier and everybody else.
Right. One thing, I'm glad you asked that question. I do believe, and I don't want to speak totally out of turn because I have not done the quantitative research around this, but most school districts, this is seen as a public safety, this is a police matter, and the governance of the streets, because remember, guys, we can't impede traffic. I cannot hold my hand up. I have no authority to tell people to stop driving in the road. Now, can I pay for that? Absolutely. But again, I have to then question what are the tax dollars that are given to this school system to do. And my argument today is that those are to provide for the very best public education that we possibly can to students. Is safety a part of that? Absolutely. But it's a part of that when the students are actually on campus. And that's the part that we take full responsibility for.
Do you plan to talk to the police chief at all?
I'm sure I will talk to a lot of people in the next few days and few weeks because, again, my charge is always going to be to do everything we can to ensure that our children are safe. Now, that does not mean that I'm going to take on a $75,000 unfunded mandate.
Do you have crossing guards out of the city limits in the parish area?
There are situations where you have those outside. And let me add one more thing, too, though. When we talk, I know that the city of New Orleans has been used in several examples from the city. New Orleans First is the most unique school system in not just Louisiana, but in this country, in that it is a full charter system. So in that respect, all of their dollars are funneled directly to their schools. So to say that they pay directly from the school, well, that's reasonable if they pay anything because it's a very unique system. But if you look throughout our state, most school systems do not have as a budget item the crossing guards. And many of those jurisdictions outside of the city are covered by their local, whether it's the sheriff or the local policing authority.
What does legal tell you? Do you think this could end up being, at the very least, it would be a threat of a lawsuit?
You know, I think everything's a threat of a lawsuit. Yeah. We have a lot of lawyers, as do they.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. And again, our goal, and I appreciate you helping us just to get good information out to our citizens. Thank you.